Hello everyone, Pete here. Today I want to talk about smart contracts. To be more specific, proxy smart contracts, right? What are they? Why do I favor them? What and how do they differ from your typical smart contract? In the big scheme of things, a lot of people disagree that proxies are the way to go. However, I feel that for these tokens, these projects that have great utility and legitimate white papers, having a regular typical smart contract is unsustainable, especially if you're renowned, right? I look at those as pump and dumps. I don't take those projects seriously. On that note, let's get into it. Many of you already know what a smart contract is. It's basically code, a class of code, if you will, that is deployed and runs on the blockchain. The purpose of this contract code is associated with the goal of performing a wide array of functions, if you will, right? In this particular presentation, we'll be referring to contracts around the EVM, Ethereum Virtual Machine, that you're familiar with. Some of the standards you're familiar with are the ERC 721 for your NFT, and then your fungible ERC20 standard. As you know, these contracts have tons of functions that execute, and the intent is for them to execute in a secure and decentralized manner, which makes it very lucrative to investors. One of the initial benefits to smart contracts is the fact that they're immutable. Having said that, the contract is deployed on the blockchain and the code cannot be altered or modified. Immutability basically ensures that your contract always remains static and the code cannot be changed. This is good for investors, many investors, because it results in a sense of trust, transparency, security, reliability, and that's what investors are looking for. As you can see here, there are typically, we can say, two parts to a smart contract: your storage and your code. For the most part, your storage you can think of as the ability to track wallets conducting these transactions and the associated transactions, right, within that contract. And then there's the code. We can kind of define this as the ability to mint functions, implementations, and basically you can think about the code as the functions of what it does and how it does it. As you can see here, we have a little hacker guy who loves contracts with outdated software. Initially, immutability was there to help prevent errors and bugs from being introduced over time. But I'll explain my position as it relates to security. In fact, as of February 2023, the latest and greatest Solidity version is up in the 8s. As you can see here, this is basically the code that's utilized to write smart contracts. Once again, keep in mind, in the beginning, the position was, and the wow factor was the immutability to help, once again, prevent changes, prevent errors, prevent bugs. Now, Solidity came out in 2014. Obviously, we're in 2023 and it's undergone multiple iterations of software upgrades, new versions, once again, because as time progresses, exploits are found that relate to security, making the code vulnerable. One of them is reentrancy. So it has come a long way. However, we'll get into why I think it's important to get a proxy contract. A faulty smart contract will lead into a huge monetary loss, right? If there's a exploit and it's hacker comes in and it does what they need to do, I think it's important, right, with any contract that developers conduct a full test and check the correctiveness of their code before deploying on the blockchain. if they're not going to be proxied or if they're going to be proxied, because all it takes is one bug, and if there's one bug that is present, it lives in the code forever. And when I say it's costly because you're moving into a V2, and that those challenges aren't free. Let's get into a proxy contract. What's a proxy contract, and why are people afraid of it? Basically, proxy contracts are upgradable smart contracts, and I like these because they solve the issues of bugs or identified zero-day vulnerabilities. If you have a contract and there's a bug that's discovered, you're pretty much living with that bug, like I mentioned earlier, and you need to go into a V2, or you live with the bug and expose all of your investors to these vulnerabilities, which isn't cool, right? So this is why I like proxy contracts. To reiterate, if there are bugs or vulnerabilities in the code, which there will be, remember, Solidity has changed versions many times, changing the contract requires a significant and sometimes very costly solution, which is reflected on the investors and what they hold. Just as important as security, you got to remember the functionality of the contract is limited to what is written in the code, right? So if a project needs to scale up and introduce new business aspects, or there is a degree of flexibility needed in the contract, it becomes very difficult to build these new features into the design. Smart contracts solve this, and we'll get into it. As you can see here, we have our initial contract, it's immutable, and then we have our implementation contracts, which are upgradable and can help. Earlier we talked about the two components of a smart contract, right? We talked about one being storage. Once again, the ability to track while it's conducting transactions or the associated transactions themselves. And then the code, right? The execution instructions, like your mint functions. Remember, what does it do and how does it do it? Well, with a proxy contract, you're allowed to keep the storage, but swap out the code. So basically your storage lives in your contract, and your implementation contracts handle the code, allowing you to change it, update it based on your needs. This is important. Once again, if you are a solid project looking to be scalable, looking to introduce new specialties to your project, and so on. There is a problem, or a challenge I should call it, with these proxy contracts. Once again, because they can be changed, upgraded, and whatnot, they become a security risk for many investors, right? Because you really have to trust the devs. You really have to ensure that you've done your due diligence, you've done your own research to determine that the devs are legitimate. They actually do know what they're talking about in terms of their white paper. They have the right talent as far as the development team goes, and basically their transactions, their wallets are clean. They have explicit good hygiene in their ecosystem on Etherscan. So many aspects come into this. However, there are ways to mitigate some of these challenges. There is your multi-sig wallet that many of you are familiar. You can have as many developers responsible for making changes, executing these changes, and letting you know that they've collectively agreed upon this. And then there's another mitigation, which is a time lock. You can set it up so that the changes, the implementations take place in a certain amount of days, or whatever that may be. In conclusion and summary, you do have your type of contracts out there, your smart contract, I favor the proxy contracts for those projects that mean business, right? That have real developers looking to come up with something revolutionary. Thank you.